The Arcturians shifted your timeline last night. Don't ignore the signs. Feel it again in your body as you listen. Tiny electricity in the pads of your fingers, a soft heat or compression in the center of your chest, a pressure across your forehead that comes and goes like the sea, colors that suddenly sharpened, silence that felt like a presence, people who seemed slightly altered, not different in who they are, but different in the frequency they carry around you. These were not random sensations. They were an activation being placed, anchored, and tested inside your field, while your boundaries were thin and your sleeping self was open. You may have brushed some of it off this morning as just a weird night. You may have convinced yourself it was too subtle to be real. That hesitation is understood. Still, if any of what I just named landed in you, the tingling, the chest pressure, that uncanny sense that time slipped sideways, listen further. The Arcturians did something to your timeline last night. They nudged a hidden corridor open. They pressed a key into a lock that had been waiting for the right person at the right moment with the right readiness. If this resonates, tap like and download the activation signs checklist in the description. One page you can keep beside your bed to notice the signals as they repeat. This is nothing demanding. It's a simple tool to help you notice what's already happening. Start with the hands. That electric tingle is not random. Late last night, when your body relaxed and the mind moved away from edge, the field around your hands was calibrated. Imagine your hands as fine-tuned receivers, a skin-deep antenna now adjusting to subtler currents. You might have felt a tiny pulsing, like a string vibrating under the skin, or occasionally a cold shimmer racing down your fingers. In practical terms, this is the beginning of touch becoming a diagnostic language, not literal medical diagnosis, but a way your system reads energetic information. Temperature changes, small frequency shifts in someone you touch, the difference between a closed field and an open one. That sensitivity is an instrument. The Arcturians tuned it. The chest is the second place most people notice. That warmth or pressure is not only heart-centered emotion, it's the body's way of opening a gateway. When the chest feels both full and compressed, it is undergoing a form of reconfiguration. You might have woken with the sensation that your breath was slightly different, deeper without effort, or that your heartbeat and the ambient room felt in a soft new sync. This is the chest signaling that your center of presence, your capacity to host expanded energies, is being expanded. The Arcturians are not giving you anything fantastical. They are stabilizing an energetic architecture so you can carry new frequencies without fragmentation. The forehead pressure, the third eye zone, is the third marker. This is not a promise that you will start having theatrical visions overnight. It is a recalibration of how your field receives images, impressions, and inner translations of possibility. You may have experienced a moment where a picture flashed in your mind that felt more like an overlay than a thought, a rapid line of images, a phrase from someone you haven't seen in years, or a sudden, clear sense of this is the next right step. That frontal activation is the interface for future self-communication and quick, non-linear insight. Think of it as the mind's way of starting to read from a different column of time. Beyond the physical, perception itself may have shifted. Colors sharpen, sound gets thinner or more textured. Silence is no longer just absence. It is a landscape you can step into and feel. People show up like radio stations. Some are clear, some fuzzy, and some drop signal entirely. You might notice how long it takes to feel truly present around certain people now. There is an assessment happening beneath conscious thought, a calibration of whom you can carry with you and who you need distance from. That discernment is healthy and a direct consequence of the timeline shift. The night before, while you slept, your boundaries softened at a key point in your circadian cycle. During that softening, an aligned window opened, not because of some headline cosmic event, but because the cumulative work you've done brought you to threshold. The Arcturians are facilitators of thresholds. They identify fields ready to hold multi-layered, multi-dimensional information, and they assist, lightly, precisely, in turning those keys that open new corridors of being. Why was this ability sealed in the first place? There are reasons that are both personal and collective, and none of them are shameful. Many of you came here carrying contractual seals of protection. To survive, you learn to compress your sensitivity. To function, you learn to keep your channel narrow. Past lifetimes, trauma, early conditioning, and the simple logistics of being in a human body have trained your system to avoid overload. There are also timing reasons. Certain corridors require a coordinated alignment between your emotional maturity, your personal timeline, and a wider field opening. For some, the ceiling was mercy. You could not have held the frequency without breaking. For others, it was an intentional strategy to ensure you fulfilled a different arc first. Last night's opening is the unfolding of a readiness that was cultivated, often invisibly. Emotional maturity shows up as capacity to stay present with intense energy without shutting down or projecting it. Integration looks like the ability to hold contradictions, to be fierce and tender at once, to step forward without needing immediate validation. Over time, these internal developments tune your field to be able to host more complex activations. The Arcturians wait for that thread of readiness.
When it appears, they act. They do not act alone. This is not a unilateral gift dropped from the stars. Think of the activation as a collaboration between you and an external facilitator. You bring the openness and the readiness. They bring precision, pattern, and a stabilizing intelligence that respects free will. Last night, they performed a delicate operation. They opened a corridor, sent a patterned activation through your field, and anchored it at specific nodal points: hands, chest, forehead, and the field around your heart space. After placement, they tested response by amplifying common micro-experiences. A nearby light flickered, a word repeated 3 times in a dream, a small synchronistic encounter on your morning walk. If you are willing, practice this simple anchor now. You may choose to repeat it silently, or write it down, a single line to hold with the new sensation. I accept the awakening of my hidden ability. Say it without drama. Say it as acknowledgement, not as obligation. If you do not feel like saying anything, that is fine too. This is optional. The activation does not hinge on your vocal repetition. The phrase is a tool, nothing more. Let me name clearly the primary things the Arcturians are opening inside you. This is a map of what the timeline shift is installing, the parts you can expect to meet, test, and integrate over the coming days and weeks. Hear them as signposts, not promises. First, heightened sensitivity. Your system will begin to register subtler variations in energy, small shifts around people, in rooms, and in objects. This is discreet at first and will feel like a series of micro-notices: a thought that isn't yours, a sudden chill, or the sense that a room is heavier than it looks. Second, a new calibration system. The activation places a check and balance inside your field that helps you quickly assess integrity. It's not judgmental, it's diagnostic. It helps your system distinguish what is yours from what is not, and it becomes more reliable with practice. Third, an intuitive channel that moves faster. This is not prophecy in the sensational sense. It is accelerated attunement to probable trajectories. Your mind will begin to receive short, crisp impressions of next steps, often framed as this or that choices rather than long narratives. The aim is decisiveness. Fourth, coherence between heart and frontal receiving. The chest gateway and the forehead interface begin to sync. Emotion and insight start to speak the same language. When they align, decisions feel lighter even if they are difficult. Fifth, memory fragments surfacing. You may find flashes of skills, smells, or images that feel like echoes of other lives or other states of being. These fragments are not presented to confuse you. They are reference points the Arcturians use to anchor lineage and potency. Sixth, neural-like pattern activation. This phrase is metaphorical. We are not describing clinical neurology, but your energetic pathways will form new circuits. That means habits of interpretation shift. Where you once looped, you may now feel a new option appear in the cognitive field. Seventh, multidimensional perception. The corridor the Arcturians open allows you to sense overlapping moments, not in a cinematic way, but as an increased sense of simultaneous possibility. You might feel 2 responses to a situation at once, the immediate and the probable. Learning to hold both without panic is part of the training. Eighth, a clearer connection to your future self. Not an unreliable fantasy, but a practical resonance with a version of you that navigated this activation already. This future self shows up as a pull, a memory, a preference that feels wiser than your current pattern. Ninth, field stabilization. The activation includes scaffolding so the changes do not tear you apart. There is a slow, steady anchoring that will ask for your cooperation. Sleep, gentle movement, boundaries, so the scaffolding can take root. You may notice these 9 items arriving in waves, not all at once. For some, the hands will react first. For others, the forehead will deliver a single clear image that feels like an instruction. Pay attention to the order. It tells a story about how your system prefers to integrate. Keep a small notebook beside your bed. When a fragment or a sensation surfaces, jot it without analyzing. Over time, you will see patterns emerge. Micro-experiences are the tests the field runs to see if the activation is stable. A word may appear repeatedly, in conversation, on a billboard, in a dream. A song lyric will seem to follow you through the day. A synchronicity may be simply that two people called you in close succession about the same subject. These are not mystical prizes. They are signposts showing your attention where it needs to go. Let me give you a small example so you can feel the arc. Imagine a woman named Leora. 2 nights ago, she woke at 3:07 a.m. with her fingers humming. She dismissed it as stress. The next morning, she noticed an old friend at the cafe looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. Instead of forcing the conversation, she allowed the space between them to exist and felt a subtle dissonance. Later that day, a childhood memory surfaced, a melody she hadn't heard in 20 years, and it came with a clear impression. You used to heal with song. This was not a promise of power, it was a breadcrumb. Over the next 48 hours, Leora found herself making faster choices about whom to meet and what projects to continue. She set firmer boundaries with a relative. A week later, she reported back that the pressure in her chest had eased into a warm openness. Her field had shifted, the timeline moved. Her life did not instantly transform into fairy tale abundance. But she did step into a different tempo of decision-making and an increased sensitivity to how her presence affected others. That is the humane, practical impact of the activation. You might be thinking, why the Arcturians? Why not another intelligence? Different facilitation intelligences have different tonalities. The Arcturians tend to work with patterning, precision, and a calm that does not dramatize. Their activations are surgical rather than spectacular. They prefer to bring a system into greater capacity rather than reward or punish. If you felt the activation as quiet and exact rather than flashy or loud, that is characteristic of their signature. Now, the timeline shift has a characteristic rhythm. There is an installation phase where the pattern is placed, an incubation phase where your system learns to hold the pattern without reaction, and then the embodiment phase when the pattern becomes second nature. You are likely in the installation or the very beginning of incubation. That is why you are still noticing discrete sensations and not an overnight overhaul. The Arcturians respect tempo. They will not force integration faster than your system can metabolize. At the same time, you may feel a tightening in relationship edges. Some connections will loosen naturally, others will end. This is not punishment. Think of it as decluttering your field to make room for the new circuitry. When you are operating on a different timeline, certain people simply vibrate at different bandwidths. That mismatch becomes palpable. Be compassionate with yourself and with others in this process. Boundaries are part of stewardship. Decisions will become faster. Where once you deliberated for weeks, you will find that you know, in a lower register, what will sustain the trajectory you are being pulled toward. That does not mean you will stop making mistakes. It means that mistakes become less crippling because you can course correct with more ease. One of the gifts of this timeline shift is less time spent in repetitive energy-leaking loops. There are practical steps you can take now to support what unfolded last night. Sleep with a journal by your bed. When you wake, write one sentence about the first impression you remember. Gentle movement in the morning, a stretch, a short walk, helps your field settle. Reduce stimulants that spike the nervous system. The activation favors clarity over adrenaline. Say no when you need to. Tightened boundaries are a sign of integration, not failure. And again, optional support anchors. If you want a short phrase to help integrate the sensation when it feels raw, you can try the second line, repeated quietly. I fully embody the irreversible awakening of my hidden ability. Use it as a way to center, not as a test. If it rings false, let it go. These anchors are tools. They are not keys that lock the door closed if you don't use them. They are simple phrases you can return to as a reminder of permission. Permission for the change, permission to embody. There will be moments of disorientation. That is normal. When a timeline shifts, the brain and the field negotiate reality. You may find yourself nostalgic for a baseline you assumed you would always have. That nostalgia can feel heavy or even tender, and at times like grief. Allow space for that experience. It does not contradict the excitement or the empowerment. Both can exist at once. Right now, you stand at the threshold. A corridor has opened in your timeline. It is not a dramatic fanfare. It is a precise, quiet rearrangement. The Arcturians slipped a new architecture into place last night. Over the coming hours and days, you will be given small prompts to test your capacity, a boundary you must enforce, a decision you must make quickly, a moment to offer compassion to yourself when integration feels clumsy. Each test is an opportunity to anchor the installation. There's a subtle difference between activation and embodiment. Activation is the spark. Embodiment is the life you live after the spark has settled into your daily patterning. At this stage, the spark is warm and clear.
If you pay attention, you can feel the seams where the new pattern is stitching into the old. The work ahead is not to create something out of nothing, but to rearrange what is already here so it can function differently. In the next section, we will track, in concrete terms, the 9 activations as they begin to manifest day to day, and you will be guided through small stabilizations you can practice at home. We will also look at what resistance looks like, not as a moral failure, but as a predictable energetic response, and how to steward it without self-judgment. For now, return your attention to your body. Notice where the tingling sits. Breathe into the chest pressure without trying to explain it away. If your forehead feels pressed, soften your brow and invite a clear image into the space, perhaps a soft color, a symbol, or a word that feels like a lighthouse. Keep it brief, keep it gentle. You were ready enough last night for the Arcturians to act. That readiness did not need to be perfect, it needed to be present. The corridor is open. Below it, something is humming in a frequency that wants to be carried. The next steps ask for steadiness, curiosity, and a small commitment to noticing. If you can offer those things, you will find the activation arriving at your pace, not someone else's. Watch for the next signs in the coming day, an unexpected ease around a choice, a recurring number or word that seems to follow you, or a sudden alignment, such as a stranger offering a piece of advice that lands like a mirror. These are not miraculous guarantees. They are markers of a field reweaving itself around a new capacity. Keep your notebook close, keep your boundaries clear. Continue to be gentle with your nervous system.
There is a turning coming, a threshold that, when crossed, will feel like a subtle but irrevocable rewiring. For some, that moment will be sudden. For others, it will be slow. What I want you to hold right now is this. You are not being abandoned in this process. There is support, both seen and unseen. There are structures you can step into to help the wiring become habitual. When you are ready, let us go deeper into what the Arcturians specifically installed last night, the exact contours of the calibration, the micro-tests they use, how to know when a wave is a genuine integration versus a temporary spike, and how to anchor the sensation so it moves from being an irregular visitor to a stable resident of your field. We will also explore how relationships will renegotiate themselves as you move through this. For now, sit with what you felt, honor it with a small act of care, and keep watching the small, consistent signs. Now we go through the 9 activations day by day, how they show up in small, ordinary ways, and what to do to steady them so they become stable features of your life rather than wild spikes. Stay with the sensations. Keep your notebook by the bed. This is practical work, not dramatic theater. First activation, heightened sensitivity. In practice, this looks like tiny threshold moments across the day. You will notice a micro-reaction in a grocery aisle, a subtle unease when you enter a room, or an unusual crispness in a stranger's tone. These are calibration taps. When you feel a sudden chill, pause for 2 breaths. Name it mentally. That's sensitivity. Do not narrate a story about it. Observe the sensation as data. Over time, you will draw a map of which environments, foods, or social formats spike your field. Use that map to steward your energy, not to avoid life. Sensitivity asks for discernment. It does not demand hermitage. Practice. When you move through doorways today, take 1 slow inhalation and ground your feet. Note any change in weight or temperature. Record it in 1 line. Over a week, these tiny notes reveal patterns. That's the work of integration, noticing without litigating. Second activation, the new calibration system. This functions like an internal compass that learns to point you away from what makes your field noisy and toward what sustains it. The early tests are simple. A burst of irritation at a partner that feels disproportionate, a sudden drop in energy after a call with someone you once trusted. The calibration is asking you to measure. Ask, did my energy feel aligned after that interaction? Yes or no. Answer honestly and use the result. This is not a moral judgment, it is a field reading. Practice. Create a 1-question check after conversations. How do I feel now? Give a single-word answer. If you notice a pattern of depletion, tighten the boundary the next time. Shorten the call, redirect the topic, or schedule a buffer afterward. Boundaries are not punishments, they are infrastructure.
Third activation, the accelerated intuitive channel. Signs are short and specific impressions that arrive without the usual logic. A sudden solution to a problem, a crisp decision appearing like lightning. When this happens, take a tiny action immediately, a note, a minute of breath, or a small test. The channel strengthens through micro-commitments. You respond to the prompt,
even with a modest first step. Practice. When you get a sudden impression, honor it with action within 24 hours. That could be sending a text, making a phone call, or trying a short experiment. Record the outcome. The success is not measured by perfection, but by feedback. This trains your system to trust the next impression. Fourth activation, coherence between heart and frontal receiving. This is a felt alignment where emotion and insight move together. You may find decisions that used to erupt into catastrophe now land with a quiet clarity. When heart and mind speak in the same tone, fear does not pull the strings. They will not always agree. Sometimes heart asks for tenderness, while the mind asks for distance. The practice is to let both speak, and then choose with both in mind. Practice. Before major conversations this week, place a hand over your chest and ask, what feels true here? Wait for an image or an impression. Then ask your forehead space, what is the practical next step? Merge the two answers into a one-line intention. Fifth activation, memory fragment surfacing. These are often cinematic flashes, smells, textures, the echo of a name. They come as references rather than complete stories. Receive them as data points. If a fragment arrives with emotional charge, sit with it and breathe. These fragments are part of a lineage being recalled. They are not demands to reconstruct the past. Practice. When a fragment appears, describe it in 3 sensory words: sound, smell, texture. Keep it short. Over time, your notebook will become a mosaic of references you can use to reconstruct patterns of skill and vocation. Sixth activation, new pattern circuits. You will notice a subtle shift in habitual thinking. Old loops no longer resolve the way they used to. Where you once spiraled, a new option may present itself. That option is an invitation to experiment. Try it more than once. Habits change when the field receives repeated new motions. Practice. Choose one repetitive thought that has followed you for months. When it arises, consciously replace it with a different phrase or action 3 times in a row. The repetition helps the new circuit form. Seventh activation, multidimensional perception. This is often disorienting at first because it introduces simultaneous possibilities into ordinary moments. You might sense both the probable outcome and the emotional contour of another potential path. Your job is to learn to hold both without rushing into one out of panic. This requires patience and a willingness to tolerate ambiguity.
Practice. When faced with a choice, ask, what are 2 plausible outcomes? Sit with both for 5 breaths, then pick the action that carries the most integrity. Notice whether your body relaxes into the choice. If it tightens, pause and reassess. Eighth activation, clearer future self-connection. You will feel small nudges that sound like preferences a wiser you would make. They are not perfect prophecies, they are orientation signals. Test them with small commitments. The future self's guidance is more reliable when you respect feedback loops. Practice. When a future self-impression arrives, take a discrete action that tests its veracity. Rearrange your schedule to accommodate it for a day, or call an old contact related to the impression. Note what changes. Patience matters here. This connection strengthens with measured alignment. Ninth activation, field stabilization scaffolding. The subtle scaffolding the Arcturians placed last night will ask for simple cooperation. Rest, movement, healthy boundaries, and consistent attention. Stabilization is incremental. It cannot be rushed by willpower alone. Treat the scaffolding like new bones being set. Gentle, consistent care yields structural integrity. Practice. Create a 3-part daily ritual for the next 2 weeks. 5 minutes of morning grounding, 10 minutes of midday movement, walk, stretch, or gentle yoga, and 3 minutes of evening jotting about any microsigns. This ritual does not need perfection. It needs repetition. How to tell a real integration from a temporary spike. Distinguish spikes from integrations by their pattern. Spikes are loud, brief, and often emotionally charged without subsequent change. Integrations are quiet, repeated, and accompanied by incremental behavioral shifts. If you experience a vivid impression that evaporates the next day without altering anything you do, treat it as a spike and simply note it. If the impression repeats in similar form and you find yourself responding differently over time, you are witnessing integration. A short litmus. Did any action follow the sensation? If yes, even a small one, you create a new conditioning possibility. If no, the sensation risks becoming a curiosity instead of a tool. This is not judgment, it is an energetic economy. Your choices convert impressions into habit. Resistance will show up, predictably. It may appear as cynicism, exhaustion, or a sudden desire to over-explain the experience. It may show up as people around you resisting the change or projecting old stories onto you. Recognize resistance as part of the map. It signals growth, not failure. When you feel resistance, slow down. Ask a different question. What does this resistance want me to protect? Often it is a tender part that fears being left behind. Practice for resistance. Name this story aloud. I am afraid this will cost me X. And then reframe it. This activation asks me to trade X for Y if Y sustains my capacity. Sometimes the trade is literal.
Less time for certain relationships, more time for rest. Name what is non-negotiable for your health. The field respects clear boundaries. Social renegotiations will follow. Some people will respond with curiosity. Others will mirror their discomfort. Expect both. Communicate simply. You are practicing new boundaries, not levying judgment. Use phrases like, "I'm experimenting with how my energy carries with others. I'll tell you if I need distance," rather than long explanations. Keep communication short and steady. You may experience physical disorientation without it being a medical emergency, dizziness, headaches, or sleep interruptions. If you experience severe or persistent symptoms that interfere with daily functioning, seek a qualified healthcare provider. Energetic frameworks are not substitutes for professional care. If your symptoms are manageable, support your nervous system. Reduce caffeine and sugar for a few days. Hydrate, add mineral-rich foods, and prioritize sleep. Gentle movement, walking, stretching, swimming, helps the field settle. Breath patterns that mimic calm, longer exhales than inhales, signal safety to your system. Micro-tests the Arcturians use are often simple synchronistic patterns. They will place repeating cues to see if your attention follows. A phrase appears in different contexts. A number repeats. A small coincidence aligns. When these micro-tests appear, respond by noticing and acting in small ways. If a word repeats, write it and ask, "What does this mean for my day?" The tests are invitations to co-create, not traps to fail. Trust the slow accumulation. Integration is an arithmetic of small choices, more than a spectacular conversion. Over weeks, a new tempo emerges: quicker decisions, increased tolerance for ambiguity, and a quieter interior drama. At first, you feel like someone wearing new clothes that don't yet fit perfectly. Over months, the fit settles. Let's return to concrete stabilizations you can do tonight and tomorrow morning to honor the activation from last night. Tonight, prepare a small ritual to anchor the pattern. Ritual tonight. Dim your lights, sit or lie down, and place a hand on your heart and a hand on your forehead. Breathe slowly. Bring to mind the single line you used earlier if it served you. "I accept the awakening of my hidden ability." Hold that without drama. Spend 5 minutes doing nothing but noticing the sensations that arise. If images come, do not narrate them into meaning. Let them be like passing birds. End by writing one sentence in your notebook, the clearest sensory detail you remember from the day. Tomorrow morning, before looking at a phone, write down the first impression from your dreams or the first sensation you feel upon waking. Even if it's just tightness in chest, write it. Take that entry as a data point. Then move gently for 10 minutes. Avoid overwhelming yourself with input. Feed the system clarity and repetition. If you are someone who senses in relational patterns, who intuitively reads emotional climates, you may notice faster choices about who you spend time with. That may mean saying no more often. It may mean choosing short calls over long ones. It may mean creating neutral phrases for exit. "I need to step away for a moment," or "I'm going to hold this and return later." These neutral phrases are diplomatic tools that protect your field without burning bridges. A note on fatigue. Activation can feel like a training load. You may experience days where everything seems heavy and you desire solitude. Honor those days. The body is metabolizing new frequencies and often needs extra downtime to integrate. You are not failing when you rest. Rest is a form of integration. A second short example may help ground the abstract in the ordinary. Consider Armand, a creative consultant who felt a precise forehead activation last night. He woke with a line of images about a project he'd put aside years ago. Instead of ruminating, he opened his calendar and scheduled 10 minutes to sketch an outline. The action was small. The outline generated momentum. Over the next week, Armand noticed fewer procrastination loops. The activation did not guarantee success on an external level, but it shifted his internal timing. He acted more quickly on emergent impulses and learned to pivot faster when feedback arrived. That is the practical arc the Arcturians support: swifter inner calibration leading to clearer outward movement. There is an ethical dimension to embodying these abilities. Greater sensitivity brings responsibility. It is tempting to become a constant commentator on others' fields, to diagnose, advise, or fix. Resist that impulse. Embodiment asks for restraint and consent. Use your sensitivity to deepen presence, not to control outcomes. When you feel a read on someone else, check in. May I share an observation? Offer what is helpful and step back when it is not invited. Community is a tool. You do not have to walk this threshold alone. There is value in a protected field where others are working with similar activations. In a collective container, micro-patterns normalize faster because there are mirrors and stabilizing sequences to practice together.
Over the next section, I will describe the kind of support that helps move activation into habitual embodiment and what to expect if you join a field intentionally designed for integration. Effective integration spaces include 3 components: transmission, nervous system support, and practical calibration. Transmission means guided activations and interpretive frames that help you make sense of what is happening. Nervous system support translates to movement practices, breathwork, and pacing that prevent overwhelm. Practical calibration includes exercises, checklists, and live Q&A where you can test impressions and receive feedback. If you choose to join a community container, look for these features: regular guided sessions that include quiet anchoring and movement, short tracking exercises you can do at home, opportunities to share without long narrative demands, and live interactions where calibrations are tested in a safe social field. These elements compress learning from months into weeks because you are practicing in a live, responsive environment. A final practical mapping for the days ahead. Week 1 is observation and gentle ritual. Keep your notebook. Make small, repeatable shifts in sleep, movement, and media exposure. Week 2 is testing and action. Respond to impressions with minor, measurable steps. Week 3 is boundary work. Exercise polite distance and honor the recalibration of relationships. Week 4 is review. Look back through your notebook and mark 3 patterns you did not notice before activation. These 4 weeks are not rigid rules. They are a scaffold to help the new circuits form. As you move toward the threshold of embodiment, you will encounter one defining moment. A small decision that, when taken, feels like a gate closing behind you. It may be mundane, choosing a project, refusing an invitation, or stating a boundary out loud, but it carries a felt sense of closure, like a door you do not wish to reopen. That moment is your rupture with the previous baseline. It does not erase the past, it simply signals that the field has reorganized and you are aligning with a different tempo. When that moment comes, do not seek fanfare. Embodiment is quiet. It may feel like relief, or like the soft settling of a stone, or like a slight reconfiguration in your skin. Honor it with something small: planting a seed, lighting a candle, writing a letter to your future self. These tiny acts mark the internal shift externally. A final note about fear and humility. As sensitivity increases, old ego patterns may attempt to use the new ability for validation. Watch for impulses to be the expert in others' journeys. Use your sensitivity first for self-mastery. When you are steady, your presence becomes the service. You were prepared enough last night for the Arcturians to act. That preparation was not about perfection, it was about readiness. A readiness to hold complexity, to accept nuanced timing, and to choose curiosity over certainty. The corridor is open. The installation is in place. Now comes the long patience of folding this new architecture into daily life. If you would like structured support for this process, there is a protected integration circle designed to accompany activations like the one that took place in your field last night. It is a place where transmissions are paired with nervous system practices and weekly practical calibration sessions. Members receive guided stabilization sequences, live Q&A for immediate feedback on impressions, and a private space to share micro-experiences without the need to explain or defend them. This container is intended to support your steady embodiment, designed to help you practice the small steps that convert activation into habit. If the idea resonates, you will find details linked below. The container is an offer, not a demand. Participate as you feel called, and know that membership is one of many tools available. As we close, return to your body. Check the pads of your fingers. Place your hand over the chest and notice the rhythm. Soften your forehead. If you wish to use the anchors we offered earlier, you may repeat one quietly now. I accept the awakening of my hidden ability. Or the fuller line, I fully embody the irreversible awakening of my hidden ability. Use these phrases as permission slips, not obligations. They are words to keep the attention steady, nothing more. Remember the title you heard at the start. Last night, the Arcturians shifted your timeline. Don't ignore the signs. That shift was quiet but precise. It is already asking you for small acts of stewardship: rest, boundary, note-taking, and measured action. Over time, the changes will look more like a life paced differently rather than a single moment of spectacle. You are not alone in this unfolding. There is support, both subtle and organized, for those who choose it. There is also fundamentally your steadiness. Keep your curiosity, keep your notebooks, honor fatigue as a sign of integration. Practice short, repeatable rituals. Choose small actions on the prompt of intuition. Tighten your boundaries where they need it. Celebrate small steadiness when it appears. Stand with this truth. Something new is humming in your field, because last night the corridor opened. Let the humming be a guide, not a demand. Let the changes arrive at the speed your nervous system can hold. If you want company in this process, consider stepping into the protected field described below.
It is a place for transmissions, stabilizing sequences, and practical calibration, designed to support your path from activation to full everyday embodiment. There are no guarantees, only study support and collective practice. You are the person your hidden ability has been waiting for. The key was turned last night. Now the work is simple. Notice, act, and return to rest. Keep watching the small patient signs. They are the proof of a timeline that quietly shifted in your favor.